Welcome to Hey, Great Shot. This is the Great Shot Podcast, a Crack Racquets and Tennis Channel Podcast Network production. My name is Alex Gruskin. On today's show, we've got another edition of The Deciding Point, our weekly breakdown of everything that happens in the Division I college tennis world. Of course, here on Tuesday nights, we break down all of the D1 women's action. And for the first weekend in some time, we had one of those, dare I say, typical regular season weekends in the college tennis world where you had fantastic action spread out across the country, not just top 16 battles, but we have shades of conference play here and there. We have plenty of non-conference action to break down as well. We've got a jam-packed show for all of you college tennis fans. And joining me, as he always does, to help break it all down is a man you know best as a returning champion of returning champions here on our Crack Racket shows, the co-host of these Deciding Point episodes, founder of the No Ad, No Problem blog and podcast, and my dear friend, John J. Parsons. Jay, hey, great shot. Welcome back to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I didn't know where you were going with that intro about the weekend, but you're right. It was shades of normalcy, post indoors, a week after indoors, So yeah, it was a little bit more of a normal weekend, and we're really getting into the groove now, aren't we?
Yeah, it was like you have a 10 a.m. Eastern time here, a couple of 12 o'clocks, then a 3 p.m., maybe a 6 or a 7 on the West Coast. It did that. You're right. Maybe you heard my hesitation in the intro as well. I think that's the way to describe this past weekend. It was a standard weekend. You had plenty of top teams in action, maybe not national indoor stakes, but still plenty of data provided for us to break down here on today's show. And of course, that's what Jay Plant and I plan on doing. We're going to break down all of the biggest results from the past week in the Division I women's college tennis world. We'll talk about the headliners. We'll offer some things we think you all should know. Then, of course, we'll get into our Cracked Rackets rankings, the newest ITA rankings. We'll preview a very fun week ahead, talk about our Cracked Rackets plans for the next few months as well, and get into so much more. Like I said, jam-packed show for myself and Jay here tonight. Of course, the reason we're able to do these shows day in, day out, week in, week out, is because of the support we get from all of you in College Tennis Nation, and of course, the support we get from our dear friends at Ellesse. You see the hoodie, it's back. I'm at my most comfortable. I'm guaranteed to put in a good show today because when you're comfortable, you're going to perform well. And when you're wearing an Ellesse hoodie, I promise you will be comfortable. Of course, it's not just the hoodies. They offer so much more. You saw the collared shirt over the course of the past few weeks. I'll bring it out on special occasions here this year. But again, to check out the entire Ellesse catalog, be sure to click on the link in the description to this podcast. We are so excited to be partnering with our friends here at Ellesse moving forward. With that said, Jay, let's get into the headliners. And there were a bunch we could choose from to start today's show. Let's start with the team we have had as the number 2 team in the country coming out of the national indoors. That, of course, is the Texas A&M Aggies. And we said it last week, for this Aggies team that doesn't play a ton of non-conference popcorn matches. Yes, they have a full SEC calendar to get through. Obviously, we saw them at the national indoors as well, but this was really their last big non-conference foray into the thick of things, and they come out of it undefeated. You look for this Texas A&M team. They put together a 3-0 week, wins over Ohio State, Northwestern, and FIU. Of course, it's a second win over the Buckeyes, whom they beat at the national indoors as well. What's your biggest takeaway from this A&M weekend?
Well, I think you were pretty generous there in describing their scheduling in the past. I mean, we can say it. They have not scheduled very tough out-of-conference matches, right? They've relied heavily on their SEC conference play, which over the past few years has not been as strong relative to years past. And so what that has meant is that last year, they run the table in the SEC, and you still have doubts about how good is this Texas A&M team. What I loved
you have
about
doubts. Let the record say you have doubts. I do not have doubts. No, sorry, it has to be said.
Sure. Well, one of us was right, the other was wrong. What I loved about this weekend, and it really didn't dawn on me until after the Ohio State match, was both Ohio State and the Northwestern match were played at Lake Nona, the host of the NCAA National Championships this year. and they played them back to back. So they turned right around after that Ohio State win and played Northwestern. Guess what you have to do in Orlando in May? You got to win those matches back to back. So I love that they not only scheduled a few more out of conference matches, that they played them in Lake Nona and they scheduled them back to back. That's great preparation for what they hope to do in May. That was my biggest takeaway is I think we could very well look back at this weekend and say they got familiar with the conditions, they got familiar with the facility, surrounding area, they found their Chipotle that they want to go to. They're comfortable here. So I thought this was a really promising sign for them, and it helped that they looked good and returned the number 2 ranking this week.
Yeah, I think they'll explore Booth Park a little bit more when they're there in May because it's a fun place to be. I think it's Booth. Maybe it's Boxy. It might be Boxy. Either way, you know the place I'm talking about, Jay. My takeaway from the weekend, 3 things as it relates to their lineup. The doubles is real. They won the doubles point in all 3 matches.
Didn't they lose it to FIU?
I thought, did they lose it to FIU?
I think they lost it to FIU.
They did lose it to FIU. Okay, but they bounced back. They win the next 2. Great shot by you. Poor choice by me. I blame the travel. They bounce back. They win the next 2. It is interesting. I mean, again, I think Brandstein and Stoyana at the number 1 spot are legitimately top 10 good, and that kind of leads me into my next point. Stoyana and Kupras are just the real deal. You feel like they're going to put 2 points on the board in 95% of the matches that A&M plays, and you look for Stoyana, who I know for certain was 2-0-1 on the weekend, was up 5-1 in the one match she didn't finish, and for Kupras, she goes 3-0 on the weekend as well. Kupras is very, very good. Again, we saw this level from Stoyana in the fall where she makes quarterfinals All-American, quarterfinals fall nats. That was a real success. And then, they were able this weekend to, dare I say, rest the big dogs. Like Brandstein doesn't have to play all 3 of these matches. Ewing doesn't have to play all 3 of these matches. Should Goldsmith want to sit one out, they have options in Morales, in Pilette that you feel pretty good about against most teams at those 5-6 positions. And when you have 2 young underclassmen in Kupras and Stoyana who are going to be able to play every match because that's what young legs can do, like it's nice that they're going to be able to pace some of the older players on their roster who have been injury. It's not fair to say they're injury prone, but certainly Brandstein has had her injuries. And, again, you can just pace everyone. I come out of this weekend feeling really good if I'm Texas A&M, other than the fact that they dropped doubles against FIU, but they bounced back pretty well. We're going to talk about Ohio State a little bit later, so we'll save that. Any thoughts on Northwestern, FIU, their resolve on the weekend?
I think Northwestern is going to have a tough go at it this year. I think given the rise that Ohio State and Michigan have made, and that Wisconsin Northwestern match, I don't know when it's happening, but schedule that one because that's one that Northwestern desperately needs to win to stay competitive in the Big Ten. But ultimately, I think this weekend was about, Texas A&M and validating what we saw at indoors, right? Sometimes you can see teams fade away, and that certainly didn't happen.
Yeah, 10-1 now are the Aggies. They're 45-8 in individual singles matches, 20-4 in individual doubles matches. That is pretty solid for this Texas A&M team to start the season. And to your point, back up to number 2, which is where we had them last week as well. But let's move on to our next headline team. How about Pepperdine? Another team that went down to Florida, played a couple of road matches against Florida, against UCF, 4-0 victories against both teams. And I'm going to steal the headline here. Chen and Brodus flexed the muscles throughout the course of this weekend. They go combined, 8-0, 6-0, however you want to combine it, because they each earn 2 singles victories. They win both of their double sets. For Brodus, a 1-1 win against UCF, a 1-2 win against Florida. Czar was up 6-4-3 all on Dudney. Czar wins 2-1 against UCF. I don't know how you don't play Brodus 1. And Chen wins both of her matches too. It's just like this team has the superstars we thought they have. They go on the road. They get 2 much needed wins.
Yeah, I was going to say the downfall of Lisa Czar is she probably plays longer points. So she just doesn't finish these matches, right? Where Savannah Brodus is hitting, more winners, playing a little bit more quickly, we'll say. But yeah, and both of them look great. They look great in doubles as well. I feel like they could walk out on, the WTA stage right now and be extremely competitive in doubles. Look, the question about this Pepperdine team is not the strength up top, right? We have known that coming into the season. It's been validated here, particularly as they move outdoors, feel very comfortable outdoors in the Florida weather. The question is at the bottom, right? And they still have only 6 healthy players, right? You have Redlick and Anacampagna at the 5 and 6 positions. And, those can be potentially question marks for them as they move forward in the season. Just anytime you have only 6 players that are going to factor in, injuries become a real question.
Campagna wins all 3 sets she finishes, was up 3-2 as well against UCF in the second. Redlick was solid this weekend, and they get a win in doubles as well. I mean, that's the thing, though. It's Redlick versus Goldsmith. It's Campana versus Yarlagadda or Tran, depending on the day. Those are the matchups if you're Pepperdine. Yeah, you have to think about. That said, again, you feel like they're up 1-0 at that number 1 double spot on the right day. And I don't care who's on the other side of 3. I'm taking Savannah Brodus, and I feel pretty good about that point. And again, when we come down to the margins, it is the sure things, because there are going to be a lot of 3-setters. Getting those matches done in straight sets means everything, and you feel like Pepperdine has players who on the right day, Chen when she's firing the serve, the forehand, Brodus, period. You just feel pretty good about some of the Pepperdine pathways to 4 points, and I don't imagine, are they back in the top 10 this week with those wins?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, and I don't know if they're going to fall out anytime soon, and they've got a fun weekend ahead as well.
Well, they're in the top 10. I think they're at 10 exactly in the ITA rankings. They're in with just a 4-pointer as their number 5 win, because coming into indoors, right, the only matches they had was kickoff weekend. So they're still pretty untested. I think you said Texas A&M's record is 10-1, right? Pepperdine's played.
They're what, 5-2?
Yeah, they played like half that basically.
Yeah.
But I will say on Pepperdine, right? Pepperdine is a team, they're in the WCC, so they have to schedule matches out of conference across the board, across the country to get those wins. Last season you saw them do the Midwest swing almost twice, Michigan, Ohio State, then they did the Oklahoma swing.
And the indoors.
And indoors, right? Now a lot of those teams are coming to them, so they benefit from that. A lot of these other teams, particularly these teams in the Pac-12, and we talked about it with Texas A&M, you probably need to schedule like this regardless, because the reality is you're not sure what your conference is going to look like on down years. You're now looking at a Stanford, a USC, and UCLA. They don't even have the matches on the board to really stay competitive down the home stretch. Pepperdine has no issues traveling out of state, go to Florida, go to Oklahoma, go to the Midwest. You pretty much have to do that now to ensure that you have the 9 wins you need to be a top 8 seed coming NCAAs.
Yeah, well said. And, again, I think this Pepperdine team, who I know they have Michigan this weekend. I forget who the other team they have this weekend as well. We'll get to that in the week ahead. Who is it?
It's Oklahoma State, isn't it?
Yeah, that you're right. And it's funny that Michigan and Oklahoma State have become travel partners, because they've already played twice. And like, do you want to go out west? And we should play a third time.
Yeah, you think it would be Ohio State and Michigan doing the out west swings together.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, again, I see your point about Pepperdine. I still am buying stock in that team. Where are you with Florida? Because that's another team, 5-2 overall. Haven't played a ton of matches, like wins over USF, Arizona, Baylor, Florida State. The losses are 4-2 to A&M, 4-0 to Pepperdine now. Those aren't bad losses. Those are 2 of the 10 best teams in the country. Now, they've got A&M again this weekend in Gainesville, as well as LSU. They have to go 1-1 probably this weekend, keep the top 16 hopes alive. They have a fun match, March 22nd, a Wednesday, Michigan at home, looking at their schedule. That's a fun one in the midst. What is the rest of an SEC conference?
Shout out to Michigan. Speaking of scheduling, going on the road to Gainesville. We've talked about this before Coach Bernstein said, I'm not letting this, this is going to be in my control, right? We're either going to be a top 16, top 8 seed based on my own scheduling. I'm not going to rely on the Big Ten to step up. So huge credit to her for that.
Coach Shaw played A&M in Orlando this weekend. So did Coach Pollard, by the way. Like, it's across the board.
Absolutely. Well,
McKenna went down. Coach McKenna went down to Auburn early in the year, played Auburn, played UNC. Like, it's happening.
It is happening, and it's exciting. I wish the Pac-12
It is exciting.
It's very exciting. This is a really exciting time of year for those reasons in particular. It's why I secretly love the fact that the Big 12 on the men's side only has 6 teams because they only have so many conference matches. So it's just a free for all for where they're filling up the rest of their spots. So on Florida though, I'm kind of holding my cards until this weekend, I guess. We'll see how they fare again against Texas A&M. It was a weird kickoff weekend. It was like almost rained out. They have to play that match at Baylor. So we'll see a little bit more then. I mean, the benefit that Florida has is there are already a lot of highly ranked SEC teams that they can feast off of, right? If they can get a win over an Auburn, over a Tennessee, not even a Texas A&M or a Georgia, they will be in decent position, and they've got 2 chances at that during the regular season and the conference tournament.
Yeah, and I like the pieces on this team. Again, they're very young, but like I think Dudney can play. Briggs is going to fight at that one spot. Dahlstrom has weapons. Now, again, they've got a lot of freshmen, sophomore. I'm not sure about in the bottom of their lineup. No idea what their doubles is going to look like moving forward, but it's interesting. They're solid everywhere, or at least intriguing pieces everywhere. I agree with you. So that LSU match on Sunday is really the one I'm circling because I think
Why?
because again, I think LSU's pretty solid. Like I think they've got some returners, they've got some depth. If Florida, like if you want to be a top 16 seed, you got to win that match at home. That's why. And it's like, well, if they lose that one, okay, they're probably out of that conversation firmly this year.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to prove that you're a top 32 team, you need to be beating LSU.
No, but here's the
Certainly,
difference: 5-2 this year. It's like we've seen them play 7 matches. That's why it's like I need to see it. And again, if they're a good team, they'll show that against LSU and they'll win it 4-1 at home,
yeah,
right? Like
yes,
that's why.
yep, yeah. Well, they need to. I mean, beating LSU will not get them into the top 16. It will maybe prevent them from being there if they do lose. But I don't think that LSU team is very good.
Yeah. I mean, again, we'll find out this weekend. UCF 5-4 overall losses, 4-3 at Tennessee, 4-0 Pepperdine, 4-1 at Auburn, 4-1 at Vanderbilt. Still have Virginia, Miami, NC State, Georgia Tech, Clemson on the schedule. They've got their conference play as well. I mean, I don't see top 16 in the path. They'd really have to beat someone. They still have some matches on their schedule, but where are you with this UCF team? If they make if they make a super regional, is it going to shock you?
Uh, I guess it wouldn't shock me, but yeah, I mean, this UCF team, it's like we saw last season. They lose a lot, but they also stay highly ranked because they pretty much
Play a lot of
play
good
really
matches,
tough
yeah.
teams. So you're going to see them drop a lot of matches. Um, we'll see. It's not a top 16 caliber team. Can they make the top 16 of the NCAA tournament? Yes, but they are outside of the tier of these top 16 teams that we've seen at indoors to start the season.
All right, let's move on to our next headline. We had our first shades of ACC play as UVA hosted the Tobacco Road duo. They took on Duke, UNC at home, and they split the weekend, which is what they needed. They go 1-1. They beat Duke 4-3. They get knocked off by UNC 4-1. Let's start with the Duke match for this Virginia team. They go out, they take the doubles point. Travinsky, Subash playing that number 2 spot. They're 7 in the country. They're playing 2. They get a 6-2 win over Jackson and Coleman. And then Adams, Collard, 6-4 at the number 1 spot. So they take the doubles point. They then get wins from Subash at 2, Shake at 5, and Ziadato with the clinch at 4. Now it's worth noting, no Georgia Drummy in singles or doubles for this Duke team. She is still out nursing that back injury, and that feels relevant because we know the best version of this Duke team certainly will feature a healthy Georgia Drummy. That said, 4-3, Virginia won the matches. They played darn well to do it, Jay. Your assessment of this win?
Yeah, the other relevant fact is that Annabelle Shue, the freshman for Virginia, is out on crutches. So she looked excellent in indoors. I think she has a lot of upside for that Virginia team. So that was tough to see if you're a Virginia fan, given the promise that she holds there. So to get this done, at home is a really good win for them. I think one of the big takeaways is that the Virginia doubles is real. They look really strong in doubles. I think the players that got the wins.
And for the record, they take it against both teams, UNC
Exactly.
and
Yep.
Duke.
Yeah, they go 2-0 in dubs. I think the players that you mentioned who got the wins against Duke in Shubash, Shake, and Ziodato, those are some of their more experienced players at Virginia. Those are probably going to be the players they'll rely on consistently. I don't know how much longer they will have Julia Adams at number one, but both she and Elaine Chervinsky at three are struggling. Neither one of them have even won many matches this dual season. So those are some tough points to be giving up against these top teams, but ultimately getting that win, it's not, I don't love that they have to play so early right after indoors. These are matches that you'd prefer to see in March or April, but this was a swing that Virginia went 0-2 last year. So to get the win over Duke, helpful timing. And this Duke team is just not where we think they'll be in May.
I will say, I'm pretty sure, look, because I put the schedule together for the ACC yesterday, tease alert. I'm pretty sure Duke, North Carolina is the last matchup of the year for both teams in ACC play. So
isn't it always?
That's a good tradition. I'm down.
It was last year, right? Because North Carolina went to Durham, they lost, and then they had to rebound immediately for ACCs where they lost again.
Yeah. No, to your point, though, on the Adams Subash situation, 1-2, Subash gets the win over Mora, and then she's up 6-4, 6-all on Brantmeyer. Adams 0-2 on the weekend. Yeah, you switch that. You feel fine about it. Now you feel really good about Subash at 2. So you try to get away with it as long as you can. I just don't know if you can any longer. Yeah, I mean, again, Chervinsky struggling, did go 3 sets with Tangillig in the first match on the weekend. I think it's worth noting we saw Scotty in singles in that matchup against Virginia, and the person we didn't see in singles, no Abby Forbes for UNC in that matchup. She didn't play in the doubles either. Just worth noting, again, in the luxury they have when you really go 7 All-Americans deep. Yeah, good response, I would say, from UNC to drop the doubles point, get 4 wins, and 3 of them in straight sets. And again, it was a good performance for UNC on the road. I agree. I don't take much. Schvetz gets in action for Duke, and for what it's worth, she gets a 3-set win over Collard. That feels relevant, right? As they try to figure out, is it Brizgalova? Is it Schvetz? Is it Coleman? What's our order in the bottom of the lineup? Yeah, I mean, again, it right now the ACC is UNC drop, NC State drop, Duke, Virginia, then the rest.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be really curious to see what Brizgalova and Schvetz look like in May, because this is not what we were promised. When you bring in, 2 former top 25 players, 2 players who have played number 1 at their respective institutions in the Ivy League, and both of them, struggling to start. And so if they can adopt to, playing Power 5 tennis week in, week out, what that means on the daily training schedule, and they start to look a lot better in May, that will really change the calculus here. But it's not like, they're struggling with a clear injury like Georgia Drummy is. That part, I think, is a big question, because they've struggled, and those were going to be like surefire wins at the bottom of that lineup.
Yeah. By the way, Drummy, I think I said earlier she didn't play doubles. She did with Brizgalova. They got a win at 3. UNC-wise, just quick question on them. They dropped doubles against A&M. They dropped doubles here against Virginia. Do you switch up the pairings?
Yeah, I don't know why you wouldn't.
Just to try something new, why not?
Just to try something new. I mean, you have 2 pairs that you have in Crawley and Tangillig, right? And Scotty and Brantmeyer. I mean, those are all 4 strong doubles players.
The thing is, so are Forbes and Tran. Mix them in. Like, you feel like you could rearrange the pieces together. Like, what about, Brantmeyer at, here's the thing. I like the teams they have. That is the problem, is I'm thinking, like, where do you change them?
I know, but don't you just like them on paper, right? Like, the results aren't there right now during the dual season.
But what do you switch? We've seen Crawley and Scotty play together. Obviously, they were great last year as well. Do you try Scotty Tangillig and Crawley and Brantmeyer?
Or what if you did, Crawley and Scotty and Tangillig and Brantmeyer? Yeah, sorry.
Or Scotty and Forbes, Brantmeyer, Tran, Crawley and Tangillig stay together there. That didn't work. But again, you could play Russian roulette.
Yeah, you could play with a lot. I mean, now you're starting to get in. I mean, they're going to have some wiggle room, right? They've played UVA now, and they don't play Duke to the last match of the season. There's only a few other like landmines potentially in their
NC
schedule.
State.
Yeah, exactly. So they have room, to play around. But yeah, I mean, again, this is a team where if they win doubles, you feel like they're impossible to beat, but they're dropping doubles. So they're going to want to fix that real soon.
Yeah, well said. All right, let's move on to our final headline. As you like to frame it, the battle of the last two NCAA champions. Stanford goes to Austin, Texas.
As I like to frame it, the truth.
Yeah. Again, Stanford goes on the road to Texas. They drop the doubles point, yet they earn a 5-2 win over the Longhorns. Shout out to the Longhorns for honoring Peyton Stearns. Shout out to the new WTA event in Austin. Shout out to the Austin airport, which was awesome in my 3 hours there layover coming back from LA yesterday.
Yeah, you didn't have to drive in or out, and the construction is terrible, but inside it's nice.
Okay, yes. Inside, very, very nice. Shout out to the Stanford team, who we talked about their top four in our preseason preview all year long. They looked like we projected them to look. Yepifanova, straight set win at the number 1 spot. She swapped with Connie Ma, who we saw struggle at the National Indoors, though Ma, a straight set win over Shavatapan at 2. Blokina, the straight set win over Rampalou at 4. You then had Blake with the clinch over Zainalova, 6-4 in the third at 3. Choi also gets a 7-5 in the third win over Zane, and then Pashkleva, the 3-set win over Valencia Shu. That's a really good win for Stanford, Jay.
Yeah, it's a really dominant win too, right? I mean, they were almost close to winning all 6 singles matches in this match. This is a team we just talked about, North Carolina doubles. Like, Stanford has to figure out doubles. This is always a weak spot for them. But look, they needed this win, right? They do not have a top 20 opponent on their schedule for the remainder of the year. And so this win gets them into the top 16, but I mean, they're basically guaranteed to be outside the top 8 at this point, but they needed this win, and they needed it really badly. And coming outdoors and playing that match at Texas, it was a really good showing for them. I thought Yepifanova stepping into that 1 position over really solid Nicole Kieran was a good win for her. This was the Stanford team that we thought we would see shades of at the beginning of the season, right? We didn't see this Stanford team at indoors, so we'll see if they can carry this momentum through a slightly weaker Pac-12 season.
Yeah, they did switch up their doubles teams, right? They played Blake Blokina. They played Choi Yepifanova, Shu Ma. I don't think that's what we saw round of 16 at the
Shu
indoors.
and Choi were flipped.
Yeah, right.
Indoors.
That's what
so it was Yepifanova
yeah,
and
the
Shu.
2 and they switched the 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Look, I really liked what I saw from Yepifanova at the indoor. She has the weapons to assert herself, has the size, the length to compete against anyone at that number 1 spot. And again, Connie Ma is 1 shot better than you. And to see this win over someone with the weapons that Shavatapan possesses, that means, again, a little bit of swagger back for Connie Ma. Blake just wins matches. Like Angelica Blake, all she does, Jay, is win.
As her coach likes to say in the stands, yes, she wins a lot of matches. And I mean, this was an incredible win over Zainalova, who last season just dropped 1 dual match all season. So at 3, Zainalova is as close to a lock as you get there. I mean, Blake looked dominant in indoors. You thought maybe, less so outside with her kind of more flat ground strokes, taking the ball early. But I mean, that was a great match. She looked excellent. I mean, yeah, she's looking really good.
You concerned about Texas at all?
Not really. I mean, talk to us in April, right? There's just a lot of pieces, a lot of new players getting acclimated to Texas. I think it does hurt that they don't have Peyton Stearns or someone like that anchoring the top of the lineup that they've been used to when they have found this success. They certainly have the depth to compete with anyone. It's really that question at kind of 1, 2 on who can anchor the top of that lineup.
Yeah, really well said. Well, then with that in mind, let's move on to the other things we think you need to know. I said we were going to get back to Ohio State. Let's do that now. Yeah, they dropped the 5-2 at A&M. They also dropped 4-3 at home to NC State. Schneider with the 3-set clinch in the end over Ratliff at the number 1 spot, 7-6 in the third. She fought off a match point. You tweeted out the video. I mean, look, for this NC State team, they go on the road. Schneider and Smith clinch at the number 1 double spot, 7-6 there. Then Smith, 6-2 in the third. Schneider, 7-6 in the third. Rajecki wins 4-4 over Allen at that 3 spot. Now, that's glass half full for NC State. I would say for Ohio State, Boulay gets a much needed 6-4 win in the third at 4. Brizniak continues her run. She can compete with anyone at that 5 spot. She gets a 6-4 win in the third. And then Marzell, 4-1 over the freshman for NC State. Like 7-6 in a set of doubles, comes down to a breaker, comes down to a couple 3-set matches. Ohio State goes 2-2 in those 3-setters. They were right there. Like they were right there with this NC State team. But again, NC State, huge win for them considering they weren't at the national indoors. I know I just took a lot of things. Your thoughts, Jay?
Well, I'm actually going to turn it back to you.
Ooh.
So Diana Schneider, ranked 90 in the world, right? Taking on Sydney Ratliff, ranked 22 in the ITA rankings. I think a lot of people would not expect this match to come down to 7-6 in the third. What do you attribute the closeness of this match to? Is this Schneider not playing well, the level of college tennis being much higher than people expect, the elements of crowd and the facility and indoors and fast courts? Don't say all the above. What say you?
All of the above, but also including the fact that I think no ad is a major factor as well. I think just again, the longer the match, the more the strengths of Schneider are emphasized or accentuated against Sydney Ratliff versus, look, the pressure you feel on a deuce point, Schneider, particularly as someone who's going to go for her shots, you're a little bit nervous. You strike the ball 0.2 seconds late, it sails on you. And I just think those sorts of things matter. Yes, I also think playing in the Ty Tucker Tennis Center is different, even than playing in front of a Melbourne crowd that falls in love with you as you continue to have success. You fight off a match point in Columbus, they're not happy with you. They are angry with you, and they're going to let you hear it. And again, for her and Smith to come through in the doubles point, for her to come through 7-6 in the third, that tells me that those weapons are real. That push comes to shove, she is going to continue to swing freely, be herself down the home stretch. Again, this NC State team is really good, and they've proven it subsequently since losing kickoff weekend. They haven't lost since they've had Schneider on the roster. Now, credit to Ratliff, who is athletic enough to take some punches from Schneider, send some back on her own. If anything, this tells me more about Ratliff than it does Schneider. And that gets back to, again, the level of college tennis is extraordinarily high right now. But how about Alana Smith, who's playing at a top 25 level again? Isn't that the big story? How healthy she has looked throughout the course of this dual match play. And it's like, we saw how good she was at the number 2 spot in 2021. 2 years later, she's as good there. And now their depth becomes real.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think what was interesting about Schneider's start, though, is that she has not looked dominant. She has not looked like...
But she's won.
She has won, but you look at the score lines of an Emma Navarro or Peyton Stearns last year, right? Those two were clearly a cut above, and dominating score lines, right?
But they were also sophomores in their second years. And here's the difference. Emma's freshman year, she was that good. Like Emma's this reminds me of Peyton's freshman year, where there were some back and forth, and Peyton did a lot of winning, but it wasn't as clean as it became in year 2.
Yeah, so I'm curious to see how Schneider evolves, particularly as they move outdoors. I think she will be much better outdoors than indoors.
Well, she also lost first round this week in Austin. I forget, tough draw, but I know she lost first round this week in the WTA 250.
Diana Schneider to
not in Austin, in Monterey.
In
Monterey, yes. Mm-hmm. And so maybe does she come back for another year?
I think there's a lot to play out until then. But one thing on Ohio State, I will say, this was a very impressive win. They were without Sophie Abrams, who has played at the 4-5 spot for them, and she has been. You have Schneider, but she's been really a lock for them to start the season. She's been playing so well. So that to go on the road without one of your top 6 at a facility that has long been held as one of the tougher places to play in college tennis, really good win for NC State, asserting themselves as, they're a top 8 team unequivocally.
Yeah, well said. All right, let's move on. Syracuse breaking through, wins over Florida State and Miami. They're going to be top 16 right now, Jay.
Yeah. Yes, they are. Tough loss for Miami, right? Obviously a very tough trip for either school to go play the other in February because just the conditions are so radically different. the Miami women's team tweeted out a video of them getting off the bus, and they're just stepping into snow. It quite miserable for people who are used to playing in Miami, but great win for Syracuse. Not many undefeated teams left in college tennis right now, and Syracuse is one of them.
Yeah, look, I mean, Syracuse takes doubles 3, 4, and 5 against Florida State. They take 1, 2, 5, and 6 against Miami. It's doing it everywhere. It's extraordinarily impressive for the Syracuse team, who I'm excited to get to watch more of because I don't know the most of them. But hey, again, move over Iowa State. Syracuse is coming for that spot. And if they're another top 16 in the ACC mix, again, tough loss for Miami on paper, though, you still feel like that team's going to get someone throughout the course of this year. The depth is once again very, very real in this ACC, and Syracuse certainly a part of the mix now. Let's move on to, again, some of the headlines here. We talked about the Big Ten earlier. Rough weekend for Iowa. 4-3 loss to DePaul. Lost to Iowa State as well. It's that first time, right? I believe for the graphic, that was the first time.
Yeah, first time in program history.
Iowa State knocked off Iowa, so tough weekend for them. On the flip side, though, Illinois wins over Alabama. Arizona, they're solidifying themselves as another top 40 tournament Big Ten team, which, again, the conference is in desperate need of. Thoughts on everything that transpired for the Big Ten?
Well, I think on the Illinois front, like those wins over in Alabama, getting an SEC win, getting a Pac-12 win over Arizona, those are the sort of wins that when you're looking at that cut line come, May, and it's 44, it's like those are the ones that can really get you over the hump. So I like that scheduling for them. Good to get on the road. This is an Illinois team that I think is, getting better and better each year. Kind of maybe not the same leaps that Wisconsin has made in this year, apparently, but still pushing right into that top 40, into that top 30. So a solid roster for them. Iowa's tough, right? To come back after, losing, Ellesse Noel and, losing their associate head coach. So, rebuilding years for the Iowa program.
Yeah, well said on both fronts. Last one, Princeton gets the win. They knock off Old Dominion 4-3. They needed it. They got it, Jay.
Yeah, and that is going to pay off significantly in the rankings. An Old Dominion team who's found themselves in the top 20. So Princeton finding some of those wins, right? Finding the wins on the road against some of these teams. Anytime you have, a top 5 player in Daria Freeman at the helm there, you feel good about your chances, and Princeton always has the depth. And it's really just about who's showing up on what day to get those wins.
Drop the doubles point, wins at 1, 3, 5, and 6. Freeman had the huge fall nats last year as well. Didn't have the greatest dual match season. She has had that good of a dual match season start this year. She has looked like the number 3 player in the country as she is currently ranked. Any other results catch your eye that we didn't mention, Jay?
So we talked about the Virginia swing for both North Carolina and Duke. I mean, you play your game of what? Bad loss, good loss. How about good losses?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, whatever it is. I'm calling it good loss.
Sure.
Good loss for Virginia Tech, losing to Duke 4-3 and North Carolina 4-3. Now that was a Duke full strength team without Georgia Drummy. North Carolina had a little bit of a different lineup there, but maybe another team to keep an eye on in the ACC, Virginia Tech.
No, absolutely. Well said. Wake Forest had a pretty solid weekend as well. They got a win over Illinois. I think they got a win. I forget who the other one was over. Oh, Texas Tech as well. That's who it was in the blue-gray, which, of course, was this past weekend. Yeah, Notre Dame continues to look really good. And, they knocked off Clemson this past weekend. That's another top 25 team in the mix at the ACC that we haven't said their name recently as well. Jay, you're making a face?
Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech gets the win 2-0 on the weekend over Notre Dame and Clemson.
Yeah.
That has now put them back into the top 25. We talked about them last week. Again, these teams that secure these early wins like a Notre Dame, and then these other teams kind of like feast off of those wins. The ACC just has a lot of highly ranked teams right now.
Yeah, it's the best conference, pound for pound, in women's college tennis. There's no doubt about that. And, again, with all that said, let's look at the rankings. Do they reflect that fact? Let's start with our Cracked Racquets rankings here. Our top 10 coming into month number 3 of the season. Not a shock that North Carolina sits in the top spot for us. Of course, following after them, you have Texas A&M, then Georgia, Michigan 4, NC State 5, Iowa State 6, Ohio State 7, Auburn 8, Stanford 9, and Pepperdine 10. Jay, what stands out most to you?
Well, I think the Auburn ranking still stands out to me. I know that they were ranked 5 last week in the ITA rankings. Seems like some of our voters have them fairly high still. I do not have them as high. That's the one that stands out to me. Otherwise, directionally, I think this looks pretty good.
I looked at the problem is I did the best wins as I was looking in my own head, not just the rankings, but who has the better wins. And Auburn beat Pepperdine. And it's like, and you just can't knock them for that. It's like both teams have beaten UCF. Pepperdine beat Florida, but Auburn beat Pepperdine. And so that's why I think they hold on to that spot. The big thing, what don't I see in this top 10? And I agree with it, by the way. It would be reflected in my top 10 as well. No Duke, no Texas, no Oklahoma. I mean, we're 2 months into the season, and again, like
those
if
are
I'm looking,
3 of your 4 semifinalists.
So let me just ask you this: are they really
from last year?
Okay. I was like, are they my 3, my 4 semi? I thought you meant those were the 3 teams.
That you're predicting.
I was like, tell me that's not true, Jay. All right. The point is, if I would have told you that, I agree, before the season, you would have been shocked. Let me ask you this. Of those 3 teams, if you think those 3 are going to end this season top 10 still, which again, Oklahoma, Duke, and Texas. First of all, let's start with just those 3 teams. Who are you most confident in of those 3 right now?
Texas.
No doubt?
Not really.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm going to go with the team that's done it the past 2 years, right?
I would say Duke, the least about. Texas, you're the most intrigued in. Oklahoma's going to be in the mix. It's just, is their ceiling as high as these other teams still moving forward? If you were to replace those 3 teams, what 3 of the current top 10 are you kicking out come the end of the year?
Okay, Auburn.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. That's probably the easiest one.
Yeah.
No disrespect to that program. It's just the top end talent of the others.
And am I
Scotty
kicking...
B, by the way, says Texas. He agrees with you as well. That's
Thank you, Scotty B. Yeah, that's the right answer. And am I doing this based on likelihood of being in top 8, or who I would kick out based on my projections?
I want Jay's projections. We'll save the math for the mathematicians.
Okay. Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State.
Okay.
And Iowa State.
I mean, if Texas gets back in, it's because they beat Iowa State. It's because they beat Oklahoma, right? So one of those 3 teams is going to be top 8. And by the way, Oklahoma State had a decent weekend as well. I don't want to forget what they did. I know they got a pretty solid win. I'm blanking over whom over. Yeah, fair. I think there's a Big 12 spot in the top 8. Can the Big 10 really get 2? Maybe. If Michigan goes and beats Pepperdine on the road, then definitely they could. Yeah, and I guess Auburn. I guess that's who it has to be, because you don't think there's no way the SEC is getting 3 top 8. I don't believe it. So yeah, I think by process of elimination, those are the fair teams. I think you put Michigan or Ohio State. It's just right now Michigan has beaten Ohio State, so that's probably why you have to go Michigan. But that's our top 10. You look at the ITA top 10. Texas A&M back up to number 2. They trail North Carolina, Ohio State 3, NC State 4, Michigan 5, Georgia 6, Iowa State 7, Auburn 8, Pepperdine 9, Texas still at that 10 spot. That's fine. I have no issues.
Yeah, me neither.
All right. Well, then with that, other than the issues,
I can find issues, but it's fine.
Yeah, it's exactly. Well, then with that said, let's move to the week ahead, because it is an exciting one. And let's start with the matches we aren't going to be covering here at Cracked Racquets. Let's start with the Michigan West Coast trip. They play matches at Cal, at Pepperdine. Cal has to have it against Michigan. Absolutely has to have it. Pac-12 needs it as well. Look, the Pepperdine, if they want to be top 8, got to get this one. And they've got Oklahoma State coming to town this weekend as well. It's a big weekend for the Waves. They're looking for 2-0. If you're Michigan, I mean, look, with what you saw coming out of the National Indoors, you absolutely aren't afraid to go on the road and beat Pepperdine in Malibu. It's going to be fun tennis, Jay. Well, give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think Pepperdine rolls in this match.
Okay.
Uh, I think Michigan's path to victory here starts at the bottom half of the lineup. But look, this is going to be a tough test for Michigan going out west, playing in those conditions. I think they do win this Cal match. I was just looking at the weather. It's not going to rain, which has been a challenge here in the Bay Area the past few weeks and months. So they'll get that match in, which is good. They'll beat Cal. And I think, look, we talked about that Pepperdine team. Doubles and the strength of that lineup is just really tough. And if you're going to have, a team that can knock off a Jaden Brown, a Kari Miller versus Lisa Czar, I mean, I wonder if they're going to play clinch or not, because that one would take a very long time.
Oh my God. So if that match finishes, it's 4-3. Here's the thing.
100%.
If Michigan goes 1-1 in the top two, I think they win the match. If Pepperdine goes 2-0, I think Pepperdine wins the match. And because it's at home, I lean Pepperdine. I still think it's going to be really good tennis. We're probably we will be broadcasting during it. It will be open on a side tab. I promise all of you listeners. All right. Oklahoma State at Pepperdine. Again, I want to see them get a big win as well. They looked good against Michigan in that home matchup and kickoff weekend. They got a good win this weekend. Who did they beat? Let's figure this out. They beat South Carolina 4-0. That was the win that they got this weekend. It's really solid on the road. I think that one's important. And then how about this? UCLA and USC at Washington. Washington getting with a win over Vanderbilt. Massive for the conference. Will the love be spread? Is Washington just straight up better than USC and UCLA? What are you expecting this weekend, Jay?
I think I would expect Washington to go 1-1. And if I had to guess, I would say that they beat UCLA and lose to USC. I think USC, even if they have questions with the depth so far this season, I think that the top of that lineup should be enough to get wins at Washington. UCLA, I just have not been impressed with what we've seen thus far. And I think, Washington is a much more battle-tested team now that they've gone through indoors than this UCLA squad is.
Bruins need it. Have to have it. No doubt about it. Yeah, if you're Washington, at least 1-1. You want to go 2-0 to stay in that top 16 hunt, but yeah, that's a fun weekend of tennis at the Nordstrom Tennis Center. I think Kansas at Old Dominion's pretty fun as well, but let's get into the conference play. That starts this weekend, and this is where I get to announce that our Cracked Racquets team is thrilled to have broadcast all season long, the rest of the way, for the SEC and the ACC. We'll have SEC broadcasts every Thursday and Friday. Coming on ESPN Plus. I was going to say our Cracked Racquets YouTube channel. That's not true, folks. We'll be on ESPN Plus. Watch ESPN, I believe, is the formal terminology for it. Now you'll be able to find our Cracked Racquets SEC Cross-Court Cast on that Watch ESPN app. Again, every Thursday, Friday, we'll be sure to tweet out the 6-hour windows. We'll be doing it's available on SEC Plus as well, which is the disclaimer I'm supposed to be giving from super producer Daniel Westoff. Again, I believe it's 6-hour windows, 5 to 6 hour windows of matches. We'll be jumping around, of course, from team to team. We'll try to feature certain matches each and every week as well. Make sure we spread the love, not only between every team, but of course, between the men and the women as well. That's every Thursday, every Friday, SEC Plus. We're extraordinarily excited. Of course, we also will have ACC coverage every Friday, every Saturday. Also on Watch ESPN, also on ACC Network Plus, I believe, as well. Excuse me, I said Friday and Saturday, every Friday and Sunday. Thank you, super producer Daniel Westoff, for the corrections. And again, that coverage starts this Thursday. We'll have it for you. And we're just as excited as for doing the SEC in year 2 as we are to do ACC year 1, because we talked about it. ACC women's tennis is the most loaded conference in the country. And we'll have some of the best matchups every Friday, every Sunday for all of you tennis fans. Again, 6-hour windows across the board. That means we're going to be working in multiple producers, multiple commentators as well. We're ready to bring our college tennis coverage to the next level, Jay. Obviously, if you have any thoughts on that, feel free to share them. We don't need any praise from you, Jay. You do that enough to us. But just thoughts on the SEC, ACC schedules this weekend.
All right, I'll hold the praise and I'll give you some homework.
Okay.
And I know you're going to assign this to Westoff, but I would love a graphic Thursday through Sunday. What are we showing? Give me the conference logo. I don't need the matches. I just need to know what I'm watching, where I can watch it, when.
Very fair. I'll say this, we're on it. The problem is with all the moving parts, because we also have our Big Ten coverage on Sundays as well, which we're extraordinarily excited for year 2 of.
Double up.
Amen. Doubling up on Fridays too. SEC, ACC, baby. We're rocking and rolling. It's gonna be a fun 3 months for super producer Daniel Westoff and I, which is why he's like, end this show, Alex, so I can get back to work preparing. We're really excited. There will be graphics with the windows, with what you can expect, the matches that are going to be playing, what we plan to be focusing on. We'll have those graphics for you each and every week. Again, we're still putting that all together because it's going to be a fun ride. But yeah, we're excited. I know I will say this weekend from the ACC front, Notre Dame's at Duke, at UNC. They go 1-1. We have to start taking them seriously as a top 16 sort of team. UVA at Syracuse. Go beat UVA. If you're Syracuse, prove you are top 16 good. Georgia Tech at NC State, Clemson at Wake and NC State, Miami at Florida State, one of those teams in desperate need of a win. Talk to me about that ACC schedule, Jay.
Well, I think those top two are really interesting, right? Notre Dame, how serious should we be taking them? We'll know more this weekend. And also for Duke as well, right? UVA is a match that they wanted to win. This Notre Dame team, this is another good litmus test for them of like, can we at least get these sort of like top 20 caliber wins? Yeah, UVA at Syracuse. I mean, if you're a Virginia fan, you're salivating at the thought of a top 16 win on the road. And look, we get to see more NC State. We'll see if Schneider's back for those matches. She just lost today. So those could be interesting as well. Lots of ACC play, a lot of ranking points up for grabs this weekend.
Very well said. Of course, we also have SEC play, and you look on the women's side, A&M at Florida. You've got LSU there as well. I mean, tons of good SEC matches throughout the course of the day. Vanderbilt's on the road at Ole Miss, at Mississippi State. They need to get some wins to build the confidence back. Arkansas at Georgia, I think, is a pretty fun one as well. Any SECers stand out to you, Jay?
Well, I think we talked about the one that should be the closest, which is Florida, Texas A&M, and at least have some of the most implications on ranking. Arkansas did go to Oklahoma. They lost that match. It wasn't as close as I was expecting, so not sure what we'll see with the Georgia match. On the Georgia side, though, looking to see, again, how does Kowalski look? She struggled there at the 4 position, and who are they slotting in at 5 and 6?
Yeah, very well said. Well, folks, that's your look at the week ahead. And again, we'll have SEC broadcasts for you every Thursday and Friday, SEC Plus every Friday and Sunday for the ACC Network Plus, and then, of course, Big Ten on our Cracked Racquets YouTube channel every Sunday as well. A shout out in advance to super producer Daniel Westoff. I know what he's been doing behind the scenes to make all of those broadcasts possible. With that said, though, that's the past week in the Division I women's college tennis world. Any final thoughts, Jay, before we wrap today's show?
No, but I am very excited about Watch ESPN.
Yes, I appreciate you saying that. And again, why I'm asking hold for praise, there will inevitably be some lumps early on. That's what happens when you work in new producers, new commentators. But we ask you, be patient, of course, with us, folks, as we know these broadcasts are only going to get better and better as the season progresses. With all of that said, for the fantastic John J. Parsons, for our super producer Daniel Westoff, for our dearest friends at Ellesse, who we are excited to have with us this season, and for all of us here at both Cracked Racquets and the Tennis Channel Podcast Network, I'm your host, Alex Gruskin. Jay, what do we tell our listeners?
Hey, great shot.
And we will see you all tomorrow night. Thanks, everyone.